The story of your rising grocery bill doesn't start in a bank, but on a 16th century treasure ship. That anxious feeling we get when our money doesn't stretch as far as it used to? It's an ancient problem that once bankrupted the most powerful empire on Earth. In the 16th century, Spain discovered unimaginable amounts of gold and silver in the Americas. They had more money than any nation in history, but just 1 century later, they were bankrupt. How? The answer reveals a fundamental secret about the money in your wallet, and it begins with how a flood of treasure broke the richest empire on Earth. In 1545, the Spanish discovered Potosi in modern-day Bolivia, a literal mountain of silver. Over the next century, treasure ships flooded Spain with more gold and silver than Europe had seen in 1,000 years. Spain had won the global lottery. But back home, something terrible happened. The price of everything, grain, wine, cloth, began to rise, eventually quadrupling in what historians now call the price revolution. It was Europe's first great inflationary crisis. The problem was catastrophically simple. Spain had a massive increase in money, but the amount of stuff to buy didn't change. Suddenly, you had far more gold coins chasing the same amount of bread, tools, and land. When more money chases the same goods, prices are always driven up. This was a societal disaster. Workers' wages couldn't keep up with the soaring cost of living, crushing the middle class. Landlords on fixed incomes were financially wiped out. Even worse, this easy money killed Spanish industry. Why make anything when you could just import it from rivals like England and the Netherlands? Spain became a nation of consumers, not producers. The treasure didn't enrich Spain, it merely flowed through it, building the economies of its enemies. The country fell into a debt spiral, repeatedly going bankrupt. Spain, the empire that drowned in gold, went broke because it mistook a symbol of wealth for actual economic strength. It was history's most brutal lesson in inflation. The Spanish weren't the first to experience this. To fund their armies, Roman emperors would practice currency debasement, melting down silver coins, mixing in cheaper metals, and minting more coins. People realized their money was worth less, so they demanded more of it. Prices rose. For centuries, nobody had a formal name for this force. When the word inflation first appeared in the 1830s, it actually referred to the cause, not the effect, the inflation of the money supply itself. Over time, the meaning morphed from describing the monetary cause to describing the price effect. This idea was formalized by economists like Irving Fisher and later championed by Milton Friedman, who famously declared, "Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon." The core idea is simple. If you dramatically increase the supply of money and the production of goods doesn't keep up, prices have to go up. So today, the modern definition of inflation is a sustained increase in the general price level of goods and services. The key words are sustained and general. A temporary price spike for one item isn't inflation. It's when the cost of almost everything trends upwards together, making every dollar you hold worth a little less. But defining inflation was one thing, measuring it was another. The first attempts in the 18th century were simple, tracking the prices of a few key goods. But these methods were crude because they were unweighted. A change in the price of bread was treated the same as a change in the price of a luxury carriage. The breakthrough was the idea of a weighted average, recognizing that a jump in the price of bread matters more than a jump in silk ribbons. This came together in 1871 with German economist Etienne Laspierre. He created what became the foundation for modern inflation measurement. The idea was brilliant. Create a basket of goods representing what a typical household buys in a base year. To calculate inflation, you simply price that exact same basket in a later year. The percentage difference is your inflation rate. By keeping the basket fixed, the Laspierre's index isolated the change in price alone. For the first time, we had a logical, scientific way to measure the force that had bankrupted Spain. We've journeyed from Spanish gold to the first price index, and if you're finding this story of how our modern economy was born fascinating, consider subscribing. So how does that 19th century idea work today? In the US, the main tool is the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, a massive operation run by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS. Think of the CPI as the ultimate shopping list. The BLS surveys what Americans are actually buying to create the famous basket of goods and services, containing thousands of items weighted by importance. Housing gets the biggest weight, followed by transportation and food. Then comes the monumental task. Every month, data collectors gather around 80,000 prices from thousands of stores and businesses across the country. But what happens when products improve? A 2024 smartphone is better than a 2023 model. To solve this, the BLS uses hedonic quality adjustments, using statistical models to subtract the value of new features. The goal is to only measure the pure price increase for a product of the same quality. The final CPI is an index number. For example, the BLS set the average for 1982 to 84 to equal 100. A CPI of 310 today means that same basket of goods costs $310. The inflation rate you hear on the news is just the percentage change in that index over time. While this is the primary method, the BLS also calculates other versions, like the chained CPI, which accounts for people substituting goods, like buying chicken when beef gets too expensive, to get a more accurate picture of our true cost of living. The complexity of the CPI creates a few persistent myths. The biggest is that any price increase is inflation. A spike in gas prices isn't necessarily inflation. By definition, inflation is a broad and sustained increase across the whole economy, eroding the value of every dollar you have. Another myth is that inflation is always bad. While hyperinflation is an economic poison, most central banks, like the US Federal Reserve, believe a small, steady amount, around 2%, is actually healthy. It encourages spending and investment, which keeps the economy moving. This leads to the biggest debate. Does the CPI reflect our reality? Some argue it understates the true cost of living, saying the adjustments are just statistical tricks. Others argue it overstates inflation by not fully accounting for how we switch to cheaper alternatives. The truth is, the CPI is a statistical average. It can't perfectly capture your personal inflation rate because your spending habits are unique. This debate became a huge issue during the Great Inflation of the 1970s, when a perfect storm of factors sent inflation soaring to nearly 15% in the US. That traumatic period of high inflation and high unemployment scarred a generation and shaped the economic arguments that still occur today. The thread connecting 16th century Spain to today's headlines is long, but unbroken. The Spanish Empire learned the hard way that true wealth isn't gold, but a nation's productive capacity. A flood of money without a flood of new things to buy is a recipe for disaster. That painful lesson forced us to invent tools to measure this invisible force, from the first simple price lists to the complex baskets of the modern CPI.